Welcome, 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 welcome to our last program of the literature season, where we are exploring one of Cindy's favorite topics, which are the 7 deadly sins.
It's going to be so hard leaving them next season. We haven't really done them all.
No, we could go on forever.
True.
We really could. As a reminder from last month, if you have not yet but would like to sign up to join me at Cindy and Dan Edelman's home for cocktails and hors d'oeuvres and learn more about how you can help advance the mission of searching for identity, there is a little note card on the table with a pen. So just write your name and email, and we'll be sure to include you for that. Hi, Carrie. For that program, which
right
is
on cue.
I'm distracted by beauty. What can I tell you?
Love to come.
And that event will be November 14th at 5:30. November 14th at 5:30. It'll be a lot of fun. Looking back on our literature season, you'll recall that earlier we did a program called Greed, and it featured Nan Goldin and the Sackler criminals, as reported by Patrick Radden Keefe in his excellent investigative book called Empire of Pain. I was never so happy to say good riddance to that terrible true story with no hero and no redemption in sight. So when I opened to the title page of Vanity Fair, I thought, you have got to be kidding me. I mean, come on. A novel without a hero? I mean, what was I thinking?
Seriously.
You see, Vanity Fair had been on my nightstand and on my reading list forever, both gathering dust. And I had to talk Cindy into the fact that this would be like really fun to read and talk about, right?
Just like Middlemarch.
Yes, just like Middlemarch. So, okay, I wasn't going to call Cindy and say, you know what, I've changed my mind, because she would come at me through the phone with an axe. So I thought, okay, I'm not going to do that. Thus, I prepared myself for this 1848 classic without a hero, which I have renamed a novel of 809 pages. So, I'm in for the long haul. So I turned to the next page. And don't worry, I'm not going to go over all 809 pages.
The Lord.
And what do I see? Oh my gosh, a table of contents that looks akin to an Excel spreadsheet. Dan, you could relate. And it's like 8-point type, and it's all italics. With nerdy joy, I skimmed the page. Excuse me, pages. There were pages of the table of contents. 3 pages in my copy.
Even Coco is out of her mind.
You can see Coco is bored. She is so bored. I got to tell you about the table of contents of this book. I will be the only one to review a table of contents. There is, all the chapters, notes on text, a select reading list, more notes, an appendix, and textual variants. Oh my God, I'm so excited. So even though, as you can see, my poor dog, she's like totally over it, but line by line, my hopes brighten, and then, I saw that a lot of the chapters started with "in which." Be more happy. I was so excited. Yeah, and interesting capitalization. So I thought, okay, Vanity Fair, lacking heroes. It has redeeming qualities. I felt I found my people. And it gets better. Okay, it gets even better.
It's hard to believe it gets any better than that.
So turning the page, I think that I have discovered one of the best prefaces of a classic ever. First of all, it's called Before the Curtain. And if you haven't noticed, I'm a bit of a drama queen. And
we would never have been able to tell that.
And it's relatively short, compared to the 809 pages. It's only not even 3 pages long. And it is peppered with wit and hubris and a voice that has kind of a contemplative tone. So, he's not like super, dark. But the message was a warning. We are about to witness an allegory and a cautionary tale. So there was so much built in already to this book by the time I got through, the shock of the first page and then the table of contents, and then I hear his voice, and I'm like, I am in. I am so in. So.
I'm exhausted, aren't you all? And I haven't even got to say one word.
I'm so sorry. In the Vanity Fair tale, we follow the lives of two women, Becky Sharp, and I just love the names of the characters, and I'm not allowed to talk about them, though, the names, because it'll take forever, and Amelia Sedley, and an entire cacophony, an entire carnival of vapid, shallow characters. Think Kardashians meet Sense and Sensibility with Zippo sense and no sensibility, okay? This cast of puppets, for that they are, scamper, dodge, trip, and fall through this class-obsessed English upper class and eventually, for a few of them, very lower class society of the 19th century. Each vignette, each chapter, each act, whatever you want to call it, explores themes of ambition, social climbing, and deceit, all fueled by vanity. If I've learned one thing through this entire literature season, is that if you have one deadly sin, you kind of have them all. Cindy, would you know? Do tell more. Do tell more.
Can you advance the slide, please?
Okay. Oops, sorry.
Okay. We know you've waited all season to hear about Vanity Fair. I mean, please, you're here. And vanity and art. We're excited about it as well. One of our favorite topics after lust, I mean, come on, lust is above vanity. Vanity actually falls under the umbrella of pride. And according to the OED, Oxford English Dictionary, vanity is an excessive pride or admiration of one's own appearance or achievements. Okay? Another iteration is the quality of being worthless or futile. Now, the Latin term for vanity is vanitas. It's referring to a sense of emptiness or worthless action, vanitas. And going back to that ennobled time of the 17th century in Holland, we just can never stop going back to Holland. We've already explained to those of you who are here for the first time that Stacey and I have this affinity to Holland, and we just never seem to get enough of it. So
actually, people have attended literature and then gone to Holland and have not invited us to go with. But that's okay, because I love that inspired, very nice. But anyway, we're available.
All right. Going back to Holland and Vanitas paintings, they're works of art that are you ready? That condemn the empty and the vain pursuit of material wealth during one's lifetime. All right? And artists like nothing better than moralizing about the notion of the transience of life by showing the reminders of the inevitability of death. I mean, it's really all about reminding human beings of their mortality. Now, how do they do this? Well, they paint works of art with rotting fruit, or fruit with bugs, or flowers with strewn blooms, or dying. They include the other things they show are hourglasses or skulls or clocks, and each one of those objects is described as, and this is an art history term. I used to tell my students, if you find yourself at dinner and your parents ask you, what did you learn today, drop this phrase, and that would be called memento mori, or a reminder of death. And so memento mori are these symbols of death that are often found in vanitas paintings. By the way, we even find mention of vanity in the Old Testament in the book of Ecclesiastes. Quote, "Vanity of vanities, saith the preacher, all is vanity." Words that imply that all human action is really just transient, in contrast to the everlasting nature of faith. So I thought that was kind of interesting. Now today we're going to look at contemporary works of art that scream vanity. But first, a brief Vanitas tutorial. And since the Dutch are the greatest exemplars of Vanitas paintings, and we can never seem to get enough of them. I really put this in for Stacey, so she'll just have a moment of calm here. We can never seem to get enough of them. We're looking at a Dutch still life on the right, on the screen, by one of the finest practitioners, William Makepeace, from the 1660s. Still life with a Chinese bowl, a nautilus cup, and other objects, and a lot of other objects, in fact. And that really, they really show and flaunt the wealth and status of the owner, of the person who commissioned this work. We could spend our entire time together dissecting it, as it reveals many messages about a life of prosperity, time, and death. There's a Ming bowl in the, can you use the pointer for me? You can't. Oh, hello, there you go. Ming bowl decorated with the 8 Taoist immortals. There's an Asian carpet that is decorated with large floral motifs. There's a peeled lemon, apparently Kauf loved to show how great of a painter he was by peeling the lemon and showing that kind of spongy, that white spongy part you find when you peel a lemon. And then, of course, each one of those, the bowl, the Ming bowl, and the carpet, and the lemon, they each show the wealth, the status, the travel, and the Dutch maritime trade, because that was at the time in the world of the 17th century, the Dutch ruled the seas, and they were great trading, they were great traders. So suffice it to say, the silver gilded nautilus cups, can you point that? Yeah, thank you. Stunning monster shape and gold teeth. They show a figure, a human figure diving into the cup. Oh, I just love it so much. Could the figure be the Hebrew prophet Jonah? Perhaps. And we have a special affinity in our family. We have a grandchild named Jonah, so I like the name Jonah. Or the Greek hero Odysseus or Ulysses. And here we go again. In art history, art historians love nothing better than to debate, well, is it Jonah? Is it Odysseus? Who knows? I'm just bringing it to your attention. Every object in this work represents the transience of life and the inevitability of death. And oh, by the way, it would be criminal of me not to mention that during this period, the 17th century Baroque, the painting is bathed in this gorgeous light, which is a hallmark of the Baroque. Now, a modern American example of a Vanitas painting is the one on the left from 1977, entitled Marilyn and Vanitas in parentheses, by the photorealist painter Audrey Flack. And by the way, Audrey Flack is in her early 90s. She's still living. She's a really great artist. She painted using an airbrush, by the way. And why Marilyn? Well, at the time, Marilyn was seen as this model, this icon of beauty and feminine behavior. Now, obvious examples, if we had class going and I could call on you, don't worry, I'm not going to, but I would ask you to show or tell me the examples of vanity that you see. They abound. I mean, they've got lipstick, makeup, compact, perfume, jewelry, yakety yak. Do they just refer to her femininity, or do they symbolize the superficial, tragic symbols of vanity? There's a clock set to 3:45, which is apparently right around the time that Marilyn Monroe committed suicide. And according to the art story, there are 2 portraits of Marilyn in this work, and there's a page that is from a book, and the book was a biography revealing Marilyn Monroe's sexual awareness. We really didn't need to be told that, right? I mean, you watch all of her movies and you would know that anyway. Anyhow, in addition, the written text on this page refers to how the power of makeup could, quote, paint oneself into an instrument of one's own will, end quote. And then, of course, there's symbols traditionally presented in a Vanitas painting, a single red candle that some scholars have said, oh, that's from the Jewish faith, except that I don't know that I've never heard of anyone yahrzeit candle like that being red. And an hourglass, a watch, rotting fruit, the grapes, the oranges, the pears, they're all just like, they're in the process of going by, as we say, as I hear people say all the time about their gardens in Maine. They've gone by. The flowers are no longer. So the fleetingness of life and the inevitability of death. Some other art historians have surmised that this painting serves as a kind of altarpiece. And I kind of like the way that is framed. An altarpiece to the movie star after her suicide at 36 from a barbiturate overdose. So tragic. So Stacey, please, we've talked a bit about, we painted a broad brush view of vanitas in art. Can you talk about how Mr. William Makepeace Thackery expresses vanity through the written word?
I certainly can. How much time do you have, Cindy? Well, I'll tell you this, only your first few pages of the book, and I had another, believe it or not, I was making a lot of noise while reading this book, okay. I had this epiphany because I realized that William Makepeace Thackery is the Victorian version of Bill Maher. I'm not kidding. I am not kidding. I mean, I think that Penguin should hire me as a publicist because this would end up on the bestseller list again. I was like, oh my gosh, I get this guy. He's sarcastic, he's quippy, scathing, and a social X-ray expert. If anyone in here read Bonfire of the Vanities by Tom Wolfe from the 80s, you know that's his term, but don't see the film. It's probably the worst film ever made. But anyway, he definitely is always looking around, seeing, being very critical of society. So in that vein, I just thought of that as a transition, very excited about it. For the remainder of this presentation, I have made an executive decision to rename the mouthful known as William Makepeace Thackery. We're going to call him Bill. We're just going to call him Bill, and then in our brains we'll be able to think of him more contemporary than like this kind of boring-looking, painful summer reading kind of assignment thing. And if you're in my book club, rest assured this is not the summer title. Don't worry about it. Although, boy, it would save me a lot of time. But anyway, moving on. Bill nails the essence of our main character, the epitome of vanity, and her name, of course, is Becky Sharp. He does a brilliant job, and we know it the minute we meet her. Our author says, she knew the price of everything and the value of nothing. Okay? She's cunning, manipulative, and driven by hunger for social status, everything that is sparkly and shines. And she'll stop at nothing, care for no one, to reach the top of that slippery ladder of status. And how do we know this from the first pages? Well, our author is also an illustrator. So take a look at our first illustration that we are treated to. It is at Chiswick Mall that we are introduced to Amelia Sedley and Becky. Stand back. Physically, literally stand back from this woman, and I'll tell you why. She is practically a dementor. She sucks the life out of everyone. Every friendship, every soul, money, trust, everyone she meets. What's in it for her? What is in it for her? In this earliest scene, we find Becky and Amelia leaving Mrs. Pinkerton's school. Becky was taken initially into the school as a ward, as an act of charity, okay? And she pays back by teaching the other students French. So due to this dubious background, because it is rumored, God forbid, her mother was an opera singer, okay? Her future is sealed when she leaves Mrs. Pinkerton's school, relegated to be a governess for the very wealthy Crawley family, not to be confused with the Downton Crawleys, but chances are they're all related, right? Okay. In fact, maybe Julian Fellows read this book and Okay. Anyway, all right. So, meanwhile, her dear friend Amelia is bound for Russell Square in Mayfair, where she will enter society. As a parting gift from Miss Pinkerton's school, both girls receive a copy of that bestseller that every girl wants on her bookshelf, Samuel Johnson's Dictionary. And Amelia is presented this dictionary. Miss Pinkerton gives it to her in a ceremony. So as the carriage pulls away, as you see, Becky extends her arm out of the carriage and flings that book with great aplomb out the window, much to the chagrin of Miss Pinkerton and the students, meanwhile crushing the heart of the maid who smuggled the book to our dear Becky right before she left because she felt bad that she didn't get one like Amelia. Our Becky has bigger plans, albeit they do not include cosmetic surgery. Cindy?
Okay, well, so before we look at some contemporary work, we're going to segue back in time and just look at an artist who loved flaunting convention, especially when it came to subverting morality and promoting vanity. And you're looking at a high-class courtesan called Nana, a popular assumed name that prostitutes at the time adopted, painted by Edward Manet almost 30 years after Stacey's novel. Notice I didn't say our novel because it's not my novel, was penned by Bill. Like Manet's groundbreaking work, Luncheon on the Grass, Nana was refused by the French Academy at the Paris Salon because it was seen as being contemptuous of the morality at the time. Undeterred by the rejection, Manet plopped Nana inside a shop window on a major Parisian thoroughfare, and where it would have been viewed by a broad swath of the Parisian population. Now, proper society didn't want to be reminded of prostitution, particularly at a time of rampant venereal disease, and of course no penicillin. Well, what do we see here? We see a charming boudoir scene where a PYT, or pretty young thing, in profile, showing off her delicate undergarments, holding a powder puff in her right hand, sporting a pair of contemporary Manolos. Notice the extended pinky and the charming tilt of the head. And her gaze hits us as she looks as though she's heard a noise. Perhaps we've interrupted her ablutions. Manet unceremoniously cuts the velvet settee with the comfy pillows off to reveal a sour-faced, top-headed man holding a cane, watching Nana as she performs her beauty rituals. Notice his expression. He looks as if he smelled a terrible odor, as well as he's about ready to swat her derriere with that cane. You know, really, it's not what we think it is, right? And here are a few clues telling us that this is no love story. I have to cite all the places that I found information, and honestly, this is a legitimate website, manet.org. You can check it out yourselves. It just sounds funny. I found this on manet.org. One thing is that the ibis on the wallpaper represents an unclean bird from the Old Testament. Represents an unclean bird. Who knew that ibises were unclean? Also, the two candles resting on the small tables have been snuffed out, possibly symbolizing a lack of affection or love. The great writer and friend of Manet, Émile Zola, published a defense of this painting at the time, and he wrote a novel too called Nana. Has anybody ever read Nana by Zola? No, I didn't think it was that popular. But anyhow, sadly, Manet died young, 6 years later after he painted Nana, at the age of 51 of syphilis. Now, how did we get from the charming Nana to the cat lady Jocelyn Wildenstein? From 19th century beauty to 20th century monster? From corsets to Ozempic? from girdles to implants, to butt implants. How could I leave the butt out? The butt implants. There is always something new beauty-wise for us women to check out. When I was doing research for today's subject, I learned that there are new treatments for eyelashes, even eyelash extensions, eyelash dyeing, permanent makeup, and on and on. I counted, there are more than 11 dedicated eyelash salons in Jacksonville. Why do we women constantly try to improve our looks? And how is vanity portrayed in art? What makes someone vain? Soon we'll look at contemporary art for some answers. But before we look for answers, let's see what Becky is up to in the early 1800s. Stacey?
Thank you, Cindy. Well, as the old saying goes, we hurt those closest to us, and the same holds true in the Vanity Fair. Out of all the characters in the story, it is Becky's mistreatment of Amelia Sedley that is most egregious. Amelia thinks they're best friends. As you can see from this illustration, I don't have to point out who's Becky. The feeling it is not reciprocated. Becky appeals to Amelia's kindness to postpone her post as governess, truly overstaying the 3-day house guest rule. You know, guests after 3 days are like fish, you gotta get rid of them. Becky becomes a permanent +1, staying 10 days and managing to get invited to all the best places and parties. With her Bambi eyes batting, Becky hooks an easy bait of Amelia's dumb, rotund, cowardly, and vainglorious brother, Jos Sedley, fresh home from a very undeserved post in India. And the author would like you to know exactly how he feels about Jos. Quote, Jos was so large and so sluggish that he looked like a human dormouse, unquote. Upon Becky hearing about Jos's Indian service, she claims to be an instant curry connoisseur. This white lie ends up being quite a fire in her mouth. Upon her first gulp of the spicy stew, a hysterical scene ensues after she also bites into a chili pepper. Now, both the reader and the author/narrator concur Becky deserved it. At least something can tame this woman's tongue. And just as an aside, I say author/narrator because the author is the narrator, and he tends to interrupt his own stories throughout the book, a lot like this.
Excuse me?
But he does it all by himself. I mean, there's not even two people, it's just him and his pencil. So it's incredible to read that type of masterful storytelling where he's like, wait, excuse me, I'd like to say something. So I found that quite humorous, as you can see. So anyway, practically everyone except Amelia and Jos can see right through Becky. And I could go on, and so now I will. Sorry. Okay, so I have a question. Why is it that in all Victorian novels, there is always a rich, cranky, elderly relation that is about to leave this earth, and every family member is lined up to have
You need to change your slide.
Oh, sorry. Thank you. At least someone's in charge. And everyone is lined up to make sure that they are mentioned in the will. Why should our Vanity Fair be any different? So here we see the ailing yet jolly Miss Crawley, who again, the author interrupts us this afternoon and says she was so miserly, even the mice in her house had to bring their own cheese. Becky befriends Miss Crawley, usurping the role from a devoted and doting Mrs. Briggs. Now, you can't like her either, even though she loves her Miss Crawley, because she's just so whiny and dumb. You just want to turn the next page. As a lady's maid, now Becky gains access to get closer to the wealthy Crawley clan. Strategically and secretly, she ends up marrying ne'er-do-well Crawley's son named Rawdon, who our author says, obviously the author has something to say, Rawdon has all the wit and charm of a startled badger. Becky now figures that she has cinched herself financially and politically a very comfy future, but the joke is on Becky at this juncture. In her performance as this loving governess and pious Christian, she has caught the eye of Sir Pitt Crawley Sr., the head honcho. After his wife, Lady Crawley, conveniently dies, he professes his love, his money, his every last farthing to her immediately if she will only marry him. Realizing that she just married the loser's son and really made a bad choice, she and Crawley make a plan, Rawdon make a plan to just run away, because that's always a good way to solve a problem, just leave. But not before they hit Savile Row and a trip to the tailor, also who they will probably stiff. Speaking of stiff.
Speaking of the tailor, shall we? So Stacey made me show this slide. She did. So you're looking at one of the bad boys of contemporary art, the artist John Curran, who after graduating from Yale with an MFA in 1986, he's continuously pushing the envelope in his work with regard to subject matter, working in areas that have been described as desire and disgust. Now, the art story, which is a very legitimate reference, says, quote, and I'm going to just go very slowly because it's so fascinating, his work mingles an early training in classical painting. So I just want to be very clear about this. He is a fantastic artist. It's like, for instance, looking at someone that draws something so abstract, and you wonder, can that person really paint? But this gentleman can really paint, and you'll see. If you look at the curtains in this scene, the satin and the way that they're formed, and it's just so he knew how to paint classically. But he paints classically with an undecidedly American palette for the absurdity found in kitsch, presenting figurative portraits, often nude, fortunately not in this painting, that reflect the perversity within our culture's obsession with beauty and perfection. Well, we don't see either of those here in this work. Although he is often accused of misogynistic tendencies due to his jarring subject matter. Perhaps this could go under jarring subject matter. He contends his presentations are intended as satirical references to society's ever-present barrage of the elusive, quote, ideal, fed to us through art history, can't blame art history, but media, advertising, and the glossy pages of magazines. This exploration into vanity continues to inform his work today. So how ironic is it? First of all, he's been known in many interviews to say that he detests American art, yet here he is. And he told art critic and journalist Deborah Solomon in the New York Times that his favorite artists are Courbet. And of course, Courbet, he loves Courbet because The Origin of the World, does anyone know The Origin of the World, that painting? Well, it's a painting with it's at the Musée d'Orsay in Paris. It's the painting of a model completely, I would say she's not nude, she's naked, showing everything, nothing left to the imagination, as my dear late father would say. So he loves that painting, and that's been an inspiration to him. Courbet, Van Gogh, Picasso, and he loves a Dadaist artist named Picabia. Well, now we're looking at hot pants. Hot pants. Or I'd like to call it Clothes Make the Man or Not. And it's about 6 feet 5 by 5 feet from 2010. So what do we see here? We're either in a grand space. We don't know if it's the tailor's shop or if it's a clothing shop where the tailor works. We see two middle-aged, shall we say, balding and spectacle-wearing men. The figure posed like a peacock, and I'm just going to call him a peacock, the figure before the mirror, who's admiring himself, is being measured by a tailor for another pair of those majorly unflattering short shorts. Now, we do know a little bit about the model for their legs. It was Curran's female assistant, was the model for these men's legs. The peacock is dressed ridiculously, right, in short shorts and dark-colored knee socks. He looks like he's dressed for a Boy Scout jamboree or a Boy God celebration, right? And the other thing that just kills me is his reflected image reveals a macho Joe Cool, which is the opposite of who he is, clearly. Think Jack Nicholson in any number of his movies, because he's got the cool shades on, and he has an attitude that the peacock can't seem to conjure up. And so what is reflected, too, doesn't mesh with what we see. It's very perplexing. There are lots of unanswered questions here. Forget about the paunchy stomach of the peacock. And the irony here is not lost on us, because the fact is that a male painter is playing on the concept of what we've talked about before in these gatherings, which is the male gaze, which is why so many feminist artists talk about the fact that for hundreds and hundreds of years in art history, women were objectified by male artists, so they were victims of the male gaze. And so here we have a male artist playing on that concept, and so where women are portrayed primarily through the eyes of the male artist, Curran has flipped that concept on his head. So if we expand our view here, we notice that Curran's technical bravura includes like a glass ball hanging from the ceiling, reflecting light. Could you just put a little light on that? I know you're just so enthralled here. Oh, you changed it.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh my goodness. Okay. And the stunning marble floor with veins and all. I had to throw in my version of veins. And the potted palm plant that's intruded on the right-hand side of the painting. And rounding out this tour de force of skill is a maroon velvet and gilded chair with a peach-colored knee sock on it in the shape of a limp penis thrown over the edge. I told my friends from City Year that we got lusty here. So you contrast that with the dramatic, gorgeous, swagged curtain whose satin edges are exquisitely rendered, as I mentioned earlier, and they serve to kind of lift our emotional response. And it's really, when artists paint like that, and the 19th century painter Ingres, who was like the opposite of Delacroix when we talk about linear versus color, and he used to paint satin dresses, and they were so, it was as though you could feel them, and that's the way that I feel like Curran is so brilliant at including that. Okay, so from John Curran, we move to British-born painter who lives in New York named Cecily Brown. Brown, whose lush works were on display at the Met about a year ago. My daughter Barry and I encountered the one on the left, called Untitled. I mean, you got to wonder, Untitled. Why can't people make up good titles? But Vanity, in parentheses, a 2005 work, and an abstract painting whose vigorous brushstrokes seem to kind of vibrate, and all kinds of color, ochre, brown, a slash of green in the upper right, and of course a yellow glove on the table. And they feature a woman seated at a mirror looking at her reflection. And guess what? That's her hair and the shape of her head mimic the artist. She's very attractive. Now, if you look carefully, nothing appears as it seems, and of course that was the intent. The double image is often referred to as a visual pun, and of course the irony is that the table that the woman who is staring at herself is seated is a vanity, and of course the whole image gets turned into a skull. I mean, I'm sure you all got that right away. Now you see on the right, Brown found inspiration from Charles Allen Gilbert, a late 19th century American illustrator. This work was published in Life magazine in the early part of the 20th century. And he shows a Gibson girl. Stacey asked me, what's a Gibson girl now?
I really felt
I
know what a Gibson girl is.
I told you what a Gibson girl was.
No, you said you were going to tell me what it was, and I kept my mouth shut because I thought, okay, tell me what it is. But everyone knows what they are with the hair and the corset.
I told you. Anyway, she sits in front of an oblong mirror in front of all her potions, okay? Perfume bottles and lotion bottles, and of course with another skull. And it's so disturbing that those potion bottles and lotion bottles are the teeth of the skeleton. Do you see that? And so from the Metropolitan Museum, they say this. They say, quote, "This is the memento mori that reminds us that death is ever present and represents a counterpart to the subject's vain preoccupation with her own image." So we have vanity here in contemporary work. And for Brown, the double game that Gilbert's visual pun describes, it also elaborates her most fundamental belief that pain, and this is fascinating, so Cecily Brown believes that her most fundamental belief that painting and drawing can perform multiple duties simultaneously. So think about this. They can be both representational and abstract, just like these two works. It can be moralizing and sensuous, like her work, and referential and consistently innovative, like her work. She's reminding us of what people of old, used to think about vanity. Now, I have one more, but I think in F of one of her works. Yeah. No, I'm not gonna talk about it, but I do want to say that this is another Brown work, and you can see she's really obsessed with these skulls, and and this was based on a 19th century postcard. But I did want to tell you this because it's kind of dicey. Brown learned when she was 21, she didn't know her real father until she was 21. She learned that he was David Sylvester, and I think he's still alive. He is a very famous art critic and art historian whose best friend is, are you ready, Francis Bacon. Now, we know Francis Bacon is no longer living, and he promoted Francis Bacon and Juan Miró and Lucian Freud. All three of them have since passed away, but the story goes on to say that Francis Bacon and David Sylvester used to take Cecily Brown to all over London, to all the marvelous art galleries, and who knows if they influenced her themes. Speaking of dark influences, it's your turn.
Did you ever know a couple and you think, boy, did she really have a bad influence on him, or vice versa? Well, I would like you to meet the Bonnie and Clyde of Brighton, which would be Becky and Rod and Crawley, okay? These two managed to stay at all the finest hotels, dine at all the best restaurants, and ride in the most spectacular carriages. Their nights are filled with smoke and mirrors and drinking and gambling and ramping up debt. Perchance or not, our Bonnie and Clyde end up meeting up with our Amelia after she marries her childhood sweetheart, the devious, awful George Osborne. Of course, cue the narrator here again, who describes George as follows. He had a face that could curdle milk and a temper to match. George was a gambler, and George had a roving eye, and he never, ever, ever takes Amelia's love seriously. Enter the vixen talons of Mrs. Crawley, a.k.a. Becky. So I will let the author take it with this illustration and cut line below to explain to you about Becky's relationship with George. She brought his cigar and lighted it for him. She knew the effect of that maneuver. Okay, so Do we know if Amelia's marriage will last with this type of woman, Becky, lurking on the veranda? After the cigar is lit and this particular scene closes, Becky is delivered a letter. In it, it is from our George, probably loaded with typos. But in it, he professed his lust to her. And, well, this destroying of Becky's marriage by her friend is just another notch on Becky's bedpost. It is very difficult for me to condense all 67 chapters with you of Vanity here this afternoon, as much as I would love to. However, I'm going to go ahead now and make a grand leap to the Battle of Waterloo, because why not, right? So it does seem fitting that two dictators, we will not talk about Napoleon and George. So Napoleon, we know. I'm sorry, Shannon. It's so bad. I know. I couldn't help it. No, I like puns.
Somebody got it. I've heard it 3 times now. So I'm just glad someone got it.
I like puns like the artist. See, I'm in good.
I
okay.
know.
Thank you.
I know.
Okay.
I know.
All right. Napoleon is defeated at the Battle of Waterloo, as we all know, and I'm happy to report, as cruel as I may sound, that George also departs our Vanity Fair, meeting his maker face down on the battlefield. So, that his tryst. What'd you say?
What a pity.
I know. Oh, well, big loss. So I know we all become Bill Maher by this point in the novel. So his pleas for a tryst with Rebecca remain eternally unfulfilled. Amelia is therefore left alone in Brussels, a mourning widow. Our author narrator, you will not be surprised, does not shed even one iota of a tear. And neither do I, and neither will you, because we all know she's better off without that schmuck. She's better off without him, right? However, oh my God, the humidity in this room is crazy. Okay. Amelia's tears for this man, she was so delusional. Her tears could replenish the Florida aquifer. Okay, I'm not kidding you. Only near the end of Vanity Fair, I'm talking hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pages into this book, does her bereavement give way finally to the obvious puppy love that every reader notices from page 1, but Amelia, that she gets from this milquetoast wimp named William Dobbin. He is a friend of George's, and they knew each other since they were boys at boarding school, and he has been waiting for our Amelia for about 799 pages. Our narrator, again, would like to chime in. God forbid he should not have the spotlight, and share his opinion on Dobbin. So Bill Thackery says if brains were dynamite, Dobbin wouldn't have enough to blow his nose. But enough of the Victorian vaudeville. Let's go to the Bolshoi with Cindy for some much-needed cultural rescue. Cindy.
So we're looking at Mickalene Thomas. She's one of the stars of the contemporary art world. And her work revolves around the black female body, and in particular from the perspective of female desire. But she also reflects a more complex representation of femininity, and power through photographs, through collages, and through paintings. And she's doing a reinterpretation. She's reinterpreting black women's bodies as seen in numerous iconic images from the male-driven Western art history. And today's focus includes 2 different reinterpretations of Manet's controversial painting, Luncheon on the Grass, or Déjeuner sur l'herbe. That was the infamous painting that was the catalyst for the big brouhaha in Paris in 1863 for what was called the French Academy, the Parisian Salon. The Manet was rejected, and Napoleon III initiated the Salon des Refusés. Okay, so we're looking here at the painting from 2010 by Thomas. It's made up of rhinestones, acrylic, enamel on wood panel, and this was commissioned by MoMA to go in their window of the restaurant, the Modern, on West 53rd Street in New York. And like Manet, Mickalene Thomas disrupts the status quo, and this work is no exception. Her subjects create a commentary on the reality of black women today, they disrupt Western notions of beauty, identity, and art. So can we go just to the, oh, and by the way, so you've got the Manet on the, I wish I could have made that much bigger, but you see how Manet is turned the nude or the naked woman into like a blockbuster cutout, if you will. He's not modeled her body to look like a goddess or a Venus of any type, and no one had ever done that before. And then the modeling that he did was so crude. You see under her knee and like under her breast, it's like, it just doesn't look finished. No wonder it was rejected. Nobody had ever seen a painting like that before. And so, and then of course, the other insult to the viewing world of Paris back then was that the fact that the models' clothes were on the grass right in front of everybody. So there was no surprise. Guess what they were doing at their lunch, okay? It wasn't discussing Flaubert or whatever, whomever, you know. So, okay, and I just wanted you to see just how, and it's such an icon, it's such a fantastic work today because we don't see anything wrong with it. But certainly for Thomas, she's trying to bring black women into the mainstream of American art. Okay, but go to, if you would take it to the, okay, so the first thing she did was photograph her friends dressed in clothing that she designed and posed. And you know, these three women are just so fabulous with their huge afros and their gorgeous bodies and their, you know, I've got things under control look. You know, the way that they're looking out at us, really capturing our gaze and holding it. You know, these women are not to be trifled with. And then notice too that how their legs are kind of intertwined, just like the Manet figures, which we can go back to in a second. But I also want to tell you that Thomas went to MoMA and to try to get inspiration from MoMA. And this is a scene from the sculpture garden where there were a series of women's backs in bronze that are actually bolted to the wall. They're by Matisse, and they're absolutely so gorgeous and sensuous and, you know, curvy. And so she liked that, and so she puts that. She makes a collage here. So this is a photograph, but it's also a collage. And the other interesting thing about Thomas, she also has an MFA from Yale. I think she's younger than John Curran, but she was given an honor to stay at Giverny. And so she's not only influenced by Manet, but she's also influenced by Monet. Because remember, Giverny is Monet's home. And so she adds some water lilies to this painting. You can see, you want to show that right there? Yeah, right there. So you have these women who look like they've been in Shaft. Remember that movie Shaft? And the time of blaxploitation, that's what's going on here. I've really just gone way off. In fact, I made a comment that the makeup that they have on their faces looks like they've been to see Renee Parento. You know, she's the local lady who does, and they could have gone to see Megan Walker too, for that matter. All right, unlike Manet's women, this trio looks at us with strong gazes. They're set in a scene of saturated colors, bright fabrics, and rhinestones. So there are rhinestones all over the final painting. Can you go back to the final painting? And rhinestones are one of her signature materials, by the way. She started using unusual materials because when she first became an artist, she couldn't afford paint. And so she would go to places like Michael's and buy the cheapest materials that she could afford. And by the way, she was at Yale, and guess what? None of her male professors liked her using unusual materials, and they, you know, poo-pooed it. But she kept her, she stayed the course, so to speak. So she uses rhinestones and sequins and glitter, and she's continuously pushing the boundaries of what it means to be a woman and expanding the common definitions of beauty. And again, we could talk about how comfortable these women are in their space and in their skin, and their confidence just seems to bubble over. MoMA says this about this work, quote, by presenting bold and striking African American women in historical compositions, Thomas offers an alternative to mass media imagery and simultaneously makes the thoughtful allusion to pop cultural references like blaxploitation and suburban kitsch, end of quote. And in her own words, she says this: by portraying real women with their own unique history, beauty, and background, I'm working to diversify the representation of Black women in art. And by the way, about 2 Sundays ago in the New York Times, there was I don't know if anybody saw it, it was in the museum. They had a separate museum section, thank you. And she was in it. She has a show opening in LA. Let's see, when did it say? In May, late May. So anyway. Okay, Stacey, I believe we're ready for you.
Thank you. So the slides that I have shared with you, are perhaps only 1/3 of the tomfoolery and outright deceit executed by Becky Sharp in our book. I do not have time to talk about her lurid affair with Sir Stain while her husband, Rawdon, sits in a debtor's prison, or explain how she owes her maid, her butler, her grocer, the butcher, everyone else, hundreds, if not thousands of pounds. Yet somehow she manages to make it to royal courts all dressed up, dripping in diamonds, that when questioned, she jokes, oh, they're rented. She keeps on going. Today, analyzing our Becky, Dr. Google would probably diagnose her with sociopathic borderline personality disorder. Anne of Green Gables, she is not. And actually, she could have been a hero. She could have been a hero if her motivation was self-preservation. But it's so much less than that. This is about vanity.
Stacey, these drawings are so fabulous because they really are punchy.
Well, I'm just so excited to have any kind of illustration because most of the time and to think that the author made these,
yeah,
it's just, I'm just.
He had to have known Hogarth.
He had to. And as I said earlier, climbing the social ladder is a slippery affair. And Becky admits, in full lack of no awareness whatsoever, quote, I could be a good woman if I had 5,000 pounds a year. But the question is, could she? You will need to find out what happens for yourself because it would be vain of me at this point to give it all away to you today. However, just a few more loose ends to tie about our Becky before we wrap on her. She does eventually nab Joss Sedley in the heart very conveniently after her husband, Roland Crawley, contracts yellow fever and he passes. And how very sad it is then when Joss also dies incredibly suspiciously, as illustrated above. And yes, insurance money is involved with this one too. So the 2 final illustrations of the book, though, are absolutely delightful because we wrap the story where it begins. And I love storytelling when it comes full circle for us. We're at a fair. So we see here now Emily, her lovely husband, Dobbin, and her 2 now grown children at a Vanity Fair.
Did you mean Amelia?
I'm sorry, I meant Amelia.
That's what I
I
thought
didn't
you
mean
did.
Emily. I'm sorry. They nickname her Emmy in the book. It's very confusing to me too. So, a little confusion just adds to the reality of
After
it all.
800 pages, you're entitled.
Even the author, I'm so glad you brought this up, because in the textual variants, they go on to say that the author, because this was serialized, it was installments every so often in various magazines, the author would give the people different names. So Miss Crawley sometimes was Matilda, she was someone else. So, I'm in good company.
Okay.
Okay, so we see Becky and Dobbin, but who is the pious woman in the little bonnet in the booth? That's our Becky. Why is she there?
She has no money.
Bingo. And what is she hawking and why? And how did she get to this point? What happened? What happened? Is there redemption? Is there hope if you participate in a Vanity Fair? Cindy, we see how Thackeray portrays Becky at the end of this book, but how would Becky be portrayed today?
I'm so glad you all think it's appropriate. So
We worried.
Seductive, gaudy, notorious, playful, glittery, erotic, adjectives used to describe the works of this artist, Marilyn Minter, a contemporary artist who was born in 1948 in Shreveport, Louisiana. She taught herself to draw by tracing princesses and comic strip characters like Brenda Starr, and she was obsessed with gender and glamour, and she studied art, are you ready, hold on to your seats, in Gainesville. She went to University of Florida. I mean, it's just beyond shocking. And she graduated in 1970, making a series of photos of her mother as a Southern belle gone to seed, showing her smoking pot, posing and freshening up her makeup. I mean, apparently it was quite the conversation at the time. She's nothing if not bold and in our faces, exploring desires and commodification of the female body in our culture, and giving a really sharp critique. And I have to make a confession. My daughter Barry, who's into the art world, suggested her to me, and when I first looked at her, I thought, no, there's no way. But I think it's really taken, I've taken to appreciating her sensibility. And Roberta Smith of the New York Times, one of my favorite people to quote, says, best known for her glossy, sensual, hyper-realistic style depicting close-ups of a woman's made-up lips, eyes, feet, and other body parts, Ms. Minter's paintings invite us to consider the ways women do and do not own their own body. Okay? So how many of you feel like you own your own body? You can just think about it for a minute. You don't have to answer right away. So here you have another female artist who investigates the different layers of what constitutes the representation of femininity in popular culture. And our first mentor is Satiated from 2003. What is the first thing we notice? Is it the freckles? Is it the sweaty face? Is it the overdone mouth? Is it the lipstick on the teeth? Or do we immediately see her, tasting those pearls? Which is, by the way, you can tell if a pearl is real or not by tasting it. If it has a grittiness to it, it means it's real. Are we repulsed? But if we are, why do we want to keep looking at her? The Financial Times says this, that she represents the pathology of glamour. Is this a contemporary Becky Sharp? Someone who would sell herself for some expensive-looking pearls? Minter's critical eye asks the questions about the fashion industry's commercialization of sex and the body. If you don't believe her, we have the Met Gala as exhibit number 1. No comment necessary. Look at this. I'm so happy my mother's not alive to see this. She would be so appalled. I mean, seriously, a wet T-shirt to a Metropolitan Museum of Art gala where the theme was the Garden of Time, which was about vanitas.
I think we're doomed. We're doomed.
Okay.
Or we have nowhere to go but up.
Yeah.
Let's look at the glass.
And so one is named Doja Cat, I think she's a singer, and the other is Rita Ora. the woman on the right. And yeah, it just makes me have a chill thinking about going out looking like that. Think how cold she probably was.
Yeah, that's not my first thought either, Elizabeth.
Well,
is
cover
what has
yourself.
happened.
Cover yourself up. Why? Nothing is left to the imagination, right? And then we have one more, just one more mentor. This is called The Dirty Heel from 2008. And she loves nothing better than promising the gross, the disgusting, and then turning it into something that she describes as beautiful. And it's challenging for me to agree, but she did a series of designer shoes, morphing the high heel, the stiletto, into an erotic symbol. And in this image, it's she obscures the shoe heel by blurring it and focuses on the revolting, repulsive, repellent human heel. A heel that features dirt, sweat, and bumps. A heel that needs a pedicure stat. Why is it that we feel like we need to wear a shoe like this? Well, heels like this are so painful. And as a society, we've been conditioned as women to strive to be younger, thinner, tighter, well-rested, and we're held up to a higher standard than men. And the men primarily are the designers of all these clothing and shoes, and they're advertising beauty industry or constructs that we have to respond or not to. Expensive, time-consuming, and it certainly doesn't lead to happiness. It leads to sore feet when you put on a shoe like this, and it's never ending. Minter explores all these ideas through her work, which is what I really like about her. You may not care for her images, but they're compelling and they're purposefully provocative, and they are thought-provoking. Okay, so I have one more, right? Yes. Okay, and I'll be quick. This is another John Curran, and since we were talking about puppets, we think that these women look like puppets because they're so flattened out, and they seem to be kind of, they seem to be controlled by an outer force, if you will. This is called Stamford After Brunch. These women are sitting in John Curran's living room. It's a snowy day. He's painted the beautiful window and curtains and this gorgeous satin floral design on his sofa. And these women, if you look carefully, they look like they're from, a different universe. They could be creatures from outer space. Their limbs don't look normal or real. They're very sharp and angular. Their chins are as well. And what are they doing? They're sitting there smoking cigars and drinking martinis. It's very bizarre. It's like that would be a rich man's poison, right? And furthermore, the one on the far right, I think her derriere got cut off, but it looks like it looked like she's wearing some kind of diaper, or just it's ballooned, and then she wears the babushka on her head, and yet they're all smiling, and they seem to be their coziness, the way he's painted them. He's enclosed them in this very cozy setting. So I've just really tried my hardest to find out information about this work. It's in the Art Institute of Chicago, and they tell very little information about it. So we have they're leaning in and they're begging the question, what's going on here? What is the story to this work? This would have been a great work to teach to young people and have them interpret it. But we really have so few clues to suss out this odd scene. Is the woman on the far right, are they celebrating her health? Are they toasting one another for another sale of John Curran's paintings? Because we do know this. We know their names, and we know they're all three gallerists who, at the time, were selling his artwork. So if only they could talk. So speaking of talking, I'm going to throw it back to the storyteller of storytellers, Stacey.
Well, I have a fun fact to share with you that you need to know in case you are on Jeopardy, because this could be a final Jeopardy question for you. If the host says, in Bill Thackery's magnum opus, these main characters are named Becky, Amelia, Joss, George, and Dobbin, Your final Jeopardy answer is, what are puppets? Using the same storyline technique as Dr. Seuss and Horton Hears a Who, or Remembrance saying elsewhere, we watched for years and we find out the whole thing took place in a snow globe. Still not happy about that. So too is Vanity Fair nothing more than a puppet show. This is another reason why I find this book fascinating, because puppets are magnificent storytellers, and they're very underappreciated because we have the story playing out in front of us, but we also wonder who is pulling the strings, who is in charge, and why are they telling this story to us in this way? Who's controlling society and all the vanities that we value? So to close our puppet theater today, this final illustration offers us hope. It offers us hope. Why? Because we witness children. We witness the next generation. And a little aside, Thackeray was a softie. He did have hope. He had a strong faith. So here we see two children packing away the puppets, packing away the present and the mistakes that are made and all the tomfoolery and the vanities, and they're packing it away. A very reliable source, John Kerry, not the political guy, but this emeritus professor of history at Oxford and principal reviewer for the Sunday Times, says this about the book we discussed today. Vanity Fair has strong claims to be the greatest novel in the English language, at least the best preface. But alas, classics are not the go-to beach reads for people like us. Vanity Fair demands a certain mindset, lots of focus, a commitment to stay with it, perhaps a magnifying glass, and a lot of caffeine. It is a marathon, but the lengthy reading experience will pay back in dividends if today I've succeeded in exposing the universal vanities that we all share. So in closing, my goal is actually to spare you from bringing this to the beach, because I am not vain enough to think that you would schlep this all the way out there to the sand, unless you are looking in the mirror and you want to bulk up your biceps a bit. So thank you very much. And Cindy and I have enjoyed this season, haven't we? We just want to say thank you so much.
Wait, and well, no, I can.
Okay, but no,
No.
Okay,
It's fine. If anyone has any ideas for the themes for next season, please inform us. Let us know. We're open and look forward to it.
Thank you so much.